All through the night, promise to see
Yahshua.
in the morning light. Take my hand, it'll be alright. Come on, save your soul tonight. Thunder, all through the night. Promise to see
Yahshua.
in the morning light. Take my hand, it'll be alright. Come on, save your soul tonight.
And notice also in prophecy, the Lord explicitly states he is bringing the day of the Lord as a destruction from the Almighty. And if you look, and I think this is where people have to wrap their head around this, it talks about stars, the constellations, the sun, the moon, the earth. It seems like it's referring to moving the earth out of its present orbit. It's almost without a shadow of a doubt that the prophecy is describing the coming of Planet X and other heavenly bodies into the solar system, doesn't it?
Without a doubt, it's called the fiery dragon of old. Okay, and it is probably, when you're talking about an inanimate object, it's the most talked about object in the Bible, the most talked about object, and we're just coming to this conclusion that is there and that it's real, because you can go look through the Bible and find 7-year droughts multiple times.
It becomes obvious as you study all these texts that the main feature they are talking about is a day of darkness at noon, the sun will not be seen, etc., which we can say they are really talking about the solar eclipse. And the Syrian records, I think that's what I showed in the previous slide, talk about a darkness at noon and an eclipse at an unexpected time, because all these eclipses could be predicted. They had enough knowledge to predict solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, etc. So in exactly 556 BC, and this is a sketch, a sky map prepared by NASA, not by me. In 556, an unusual and unexpected eclipse darkness at noon took place. And it is my conclusion in the book, The End of Days, that is exactly when Nibiru last was near Earth and created that eclipse.
Okay? Mm-hmm. Tells me that these books in the Bible are not random. It's giving us an end result. Each story is giving us data to piece together what the end result would be, because it made a comment that this will be the worst time for Earth in its history of Earth. Knowing Noah's flood, that's pretty an extreme statement. That's an extreme statement. Yeah. Okay.
Scream in terror, for the day of the Lord has arrived. The time for the Almighty to destroy. Every arm is paralyzed with fear. Every heart melts, and people are terrified. Pangs of anguish grip them like those of a woman in labor. They look helplessly at one another, their faces aflame with fear. For see, the day of the Lord is coming, the terrible day of his fury and fierce anger. The land will be made desolate, and all the sinners destroyed with it.
I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder,
Come and see!
Then everyone, the kings of the earth, the rulers, the generals, the wealthy, the powerful, and every slave and free person, all hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. cried to the mountains and the rocks.
Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come. Who can withstand it? Everything they built will fall, and from the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one. Goddamn America! Goddamn America! Goddamn America!
I saw the end of the world. I could feel all this death.
Now, this is the one that people should be the most familiar with. This is Yeshua's sacrifice.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, there was 3 hours of darkness? And it says the moon and the sun was eclipsed.
The Bible reads in Matthew chapter 27, verse 45 through 46. Now from the 6th hour until the 9th hour there was darkness over all the land. And about the 9th hour Yahushua cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my El, why have you forsaken me? It also reads in Luke chapter 23, verse 44 through 45. Now it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. The sun was already darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two.
Well, we have a problem there. You cannot have a double eclipse in a normal state. It takes a new moon to make a solar eclipse. And a solar eclipse caused by the moon can only give you 7.3 minutes of darkness. Okay? But the text says there was 3 hours. Well, if you take a close look at this, a solar eclipse in a natural state only covers a small section of the earth with darkness. The text says the whole earth was darkened, as well as outside text that says the whole earth was darkened during this period. Rome was darkened during the same time as Jerusalem, as well as parts of Africa. All of that area of the known world was darkened. That can't happen from a lunar eclipse. This in turn came to the exact timing where he had 3 hours of darkness on the cross, and when the centurion pierced him, the ground opened up. There was a large earthquake where his blood went through the fissure that opened up, anointing probably the ark, where the priests used to practice anointing the ark with the lamb's blood. This time the rehearsal pattern became a real pattern.
You heard it right. According to the data, this planet X was there during the time of the crucifixion. But with all the research, documents, charts, and calculations that Gil has carefully analyzed, there was no way we could explain each and every account in great detail with this documentary. But I felt it important we touch upon a few, the crucifixion being one of them. Remember what I said earlier. We are analyzing Planet X 7X's timeline of events with the Bible through the eyes of a literal interpretation.
What's interesting about Yeshua's sacrifice at that time period, our biblical records mentions 2 eclipses at the same time, and that's impossible on a normal circumstances, because the moon is what causes a solar eclipse. To have a double eclipse, it has to involve a third body, because this was Passover. The moon is on the wrong side of Earth for it to be involved in front of the sun. And there's outside text as well that qualifies this, that the entire earth was darkened. The moon can only darken a small sliver of shadows that goes over certain country regions at the time. It doesn't darken the entire earth. The moon can only give you 7.3 to 7.5 minutes of darkness. And this was documented even outside the Bible as 3 hours of total darkness.
Therefore, according to the research, you cannot have a double eclipse without a third object, meaning, in order to have a solar eclipse, it cannot be during a full moon phase cycle. But according to the Bible, the sun was eclipsed for 3 hours. If that is the case, then during the crucifixion, the moon would have gone up to eclipse the sun for 3 hours, gone back down in its rightful position, only to go back up once again after the sun had set. This is not scientifically possible, since science teaches us that the moon can only block the sun for 7 minutes, giving credence to Gill's third object blocking the sun.
That's a sizable body that passed in front of the sun that blocked us, causing also the eclipse of the moon. The model shows that this object was between 6.5 and 7.5 times the diameter of Earth.
And one of the interesting things to contemplate here is the ancient cultures, as we read, the ancient pagan cultures, were terrified of the planet Mars. Why were these ancient cultures, who had less, sophistication than we have, less interest in space, and we think of massive.
Why were they obsessed by it?
They were obsessed. They, in fact, really terrified. They had priesthoods. They had whole rites that were organized. And one of the reasons we discover is apparently there's evidence that the planet Mars interfered in their lives on a periodic basis, so much so as to destroy cities and so forth.
I cannot tell you who I am, or how I was able to obtain the photos. All I can say for now is that these photos are very real. These objects are heading towards us, and they will become visible to every human on Earth within the next couple of years. This is a matter of national security, and the governments of the world are trying their best to prevent global panic. They are also trying their best on how to deal with this unavoidable event.
Yahshua.
In the morning light.